Hello and welcome to the Bucketlister podcast. Join your host Keith Crockford along with special guests who have travelled the world, here to share stories of their adventures and plenty of inspo to add to your bucket list. Now, let's get into today's episode.
Hello everyone and welcome to this episode of the Bucketlister podcast. I am your host Keith Crockford, and today I am recording this episode from a very windy Iceland, and I've been joined by Jake, who's not in Iceland, although he might have just been to Iceland for his tea and get his shopping, but he's not here with me. So hello, Jake.
How are we doing, Keith? I'm very, very jealous.
Well, I haven't seen any northern lights yet, so you've got nothing to be jealous about. It's very cloudy, so I haven't given you that jealousy factor quite just yet. But yeah, hopefully in the coming days, we're right down in the south of Iceland at the minute, heading to the east of Iceland tomorrow. But yeah, no, it's been a great trip so far. We're only on day 2. So I am super looking forward to seeing some more stuff. I've spent more time in thermal baths than I have in the last 2 days. But
it was about time you had one.
Well, exactly that. And I've had, like with anything, when you're waiting for a bus, 2 come along at once. So, but we are going to be chatting today, and Jake's come on to give me a hand because I was at a adventure travel conference last week, and they'd done some really great data on current trends in adventure travel at the minute. And it was super interesting to hear it. And I was speaking to Jake about it last week after the conference, and we thought maybe everybody else would be interested in seeing how they kind of fit into where the current trends of travel are. Now, obviously, this is across the whole adventure travel spectrum. And yeah, I think the data was really interesting, Jake, wasn't it?
The data was really interesting. And I think for me, I found it so interesting with seeing how it's changed in the last couple of years, especially with COVID and the pandemic and people not being able to travel. Now that people are able to start exploring again, where they've chosen to go to, what they've chosen to do, I found that a really interesting increase or really interesting data that came across.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think, in terms of like one of the topics that came up was about styles of travel and which had seen the largest increase in popularity. And this was super interesting from our perspective, because coming in top in the style of travel was from a tailor-made itinerary perspective. Now, obviously, we do a little bit of tailor-made stuff. People can request to us, they want a private trip. They want a different date to what we're offering. Can we, they want to change something in the itinerary. And that still came out on top. But the interesting thing was it was followed really closely behind by group tours. And in terms of tailor-made itineraries took 46%, group tours took 38%, and self-guided only took 16% of the market. And it was interesting for me that not so much the tailor-made stuff, but it was the difference between the self-guided and the group tours that surprised me, really. I would have thought a lot more people would have wanted to have gone self-guided rather than going on a group tour. And I know we sell group tours and that's what we do, but obviously we get a lot of feedback from people all the time who say they want to go and do their own thing. They don't want to be shown where to go. They want to, but the data is suggesting that actually more people now do want to be guided in a group and travel with a group and not go private.
I think a lot of that comes down to the fact that people spent so long being isolated. And even if you were isolating with people, I think, you potentially got fed up with them quite quickly. So having the opportunity to go traveling with a different group of people, meeting new people, socializing again, I think from all of the things that the groups that I've taken out over the last few months, a lot of what they've been saying is it's really nice to get out and make memories with new people. So yeah, I think that's definitely a contributing factor to why people are maybe steering away from the solo travel and starting to go towards group travel.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's I mean, there are people out there who know what they want, but I think again in adventure travel and going to new destinations, a lot of the time people don't really know what they can do in those destinations, and I'll allow it to a group tour in essence to tell them where the best things to go and to book a pre-organized itinerary that they don't have to think about anything and they can just jump on and get it done.
So when it comes down to those type of itineraries, what type of activities are proving more popular? What did you find out?
Well, this is really interesting because obviously originally we set out as a walking trekking company. Our first trips predominantly were the Kilimanjaros, the Everest base camps, the Machu Picchus. And over the years, we've moved more into the multi-activity and more into the, adventure travel, soft adventure kind of trips as well. But what came out on top was actually that was walking and hiking was the top activity that people were choosing. And that was by quite a large distance, really. I mean, like if I go down the list, which made me smile when I saw it because it pretty much covers all of our trips, which was lovely. But walking and hiking took first place. Wildlife and nature came in second, closely followed by multi-activity. And then the next one was actually bucket list iconic trips was how it was categorized, which obviously made me smile and everyone look at me who knew me in the conference, knowing that I was from the bucket list company. And then it was cycling holidays, then community-based tourism, foodie tours. The surprising one for me was that what did that come in? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. In 8th place was adventure challenges, i.e. climbing Mount Kilimanjaro. And then behind that was wellness tourism. And the kind of adventure challenge one surprised me a little bit. But I kind of then thought, well, a lot of those adventure challenges would also come into walking and hiking as well. So actually, was that skewing the data a little bit in terms of that? But it's certainly, the top 4 or 5 categories really were basically discussing our trips in terms of what we offer. So I think from that perspective, it kind of made me realize that we're putting the right activities on and we're running the right trips in that sense because it's what people want to do. But yeah, it was super interesting to see that walking and hiking was so far out in terms of the activities that are proving more popular in, sort of bookings looking for 2024, really.
Yeah, I think, and again, it's one of those where it's what people had access to during lockdown is that lots of people started really enjoying going out for a walk and being able to explore the local area. And I think that I've met so many people now that have recently got into hiking and walking and just being outside. And I also remember when the film Free Solo came out, obviously you own a climbing center. When that film came out, everybody started talking about climbing and everybody started going and trying it and giving it a go. So I think that, yeah, big moments like that really impact the outdoor industry with, what's on brand and what's trendy and all of that sort of stuff. So yeah, I think it's really nice that people are getting out and hiking and walking. But you mentioned about Kilimanjaro.
But before you go into that,
Sorry.
just talking about that, because I've got a really interesting story and it's got nothing really to do with adventure travel. But for anyone who kind of knows me, they'll know that one of my favorite hobbies is darts. Like, now you might not accept that, but one of my favorite hobbies is playing darts, and I love the darts. And last night in Iceland, I went to the world's largest darts bar.
Is that the bar's the largest or the darts are the biggest darts?
The bar is the largest.
Right. Okay.
And the place was absolutely massive and filled with dartboards everywhere. And I was speaking to our local guide today about it. And he said, 2 years ago, nobody played darts in Iceland. And then all of a sudden, Iceland showed the World Championship darts on the TV. and the country just went crazy for it. Now everybody in Iceland plays darts. And just going back to what you were saying then about the free solo in the climbing, it's exactly the same as that. Like something gets shown to somebody and it just changes. And like I was in there on a Monday night and there must have been 100 people in there playing darts last night. Like,
wow.
So I'm going to.
I remember recently.
To our Iceland trips with the itinerary,
but we'll go and play darts. Recently there was that guy Luke Littler, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Who won the Luke the Nuke, is he? So I remember loads of people talking about him, and I think Amazon said something where the sale of dartboards had just shot up unbelievably. But I definitely feel that happened with hiking and walking during lockdown, because I think people started craving that freedom, and I think people were just desperate to go out. And then actually, when they did get out and they started exploring, they realised, actually it's really good fun. Like there's loads of places you can go and see. And then if you want to push that to the next level, places like Kilimanjaro, Everest Base Camp are a great way to take that to the next step. But that is then what I was going to ask you next. Is obviously we've spoken about which type of activities, but where are they going? What are the destinations that are proving the most popular for people to go to at the moment?
Well, for 2024, top of the list was Europe, closely followed by Asia. Then that was closely followed by Africa. And I think I kind of get that in terms of if you're looking at it from a travel perspective. I think Europe's had a big increase. I think purely because of the current financial situation and the sort of economic stability that we're currently going through. I think, but also I think as well, like Europe is a lot more accessible for shorter trips. So maybe more people are booking. We've always said this, haven't we? Like, you might go and do one big trip to South America or to Africa each year, but you might do a couple of shorter trips to Europe. So I wonder whether or not that statistic is a little bit skewed in terms of the fact that people are doing multiple European trips rather than just doing one trip to Nepal. They might be doing a trip to Nepal and 2 trips to Europe. So therefore Europe would be higher. But I kind of think the increases probably come from the economic being unstable at the minute as we are. And I think sustainability might have a little bit in terms of that. Like people are thinking about where they're traveling a little bit as well. I think that might have something to do with it. And I know, it's on our radar. We've always had a lot more trips in Asia, in Africa than we have in Europe. And, it's one thing that we're working really hard on at the minute to look at our offering in Europe and to have, we launched over the last couple of years, we've launched, a couple more in Europe. But, I know we've got a couple of new trips that we will be launching in the coming months that will be in Europe. So I think, we've got to think about that, and we've got to look at that data as a company and think, well, actually, if Europe, why are we not doing more in Europe than we currently are? It didn't surprise me that Asia and Africa came next on the list, really. The Americas is a big place in terms of, you've got South America. I mean, we as a company, we don't do a great deal in America, but, we do a lot more in Asia and Africa than we do in Europe. And then, the interesting one was that the Middle East was still showing on the list, because I kind of feel that, that's going to take obviously a massive hit this year in terms of popularity, which will be a shame for countries like Jordan and stuff like that, as we discussed on the podcast. I did one with Dave a few weeks back when he came back from Jordan. And I think, people are going to look to go somewhere else and do something different and maybe come back to that another time. And, as we said on the podcast, Jordan is completely safe, so don't dismiss it. But I just think, in people's heads, it never helps when there's, when the stability isn't very good in a country, and the neighboring countries then get affected as well. But the surprise for me was more that Antarctica and the Pacific were almost in line with the Middle East in popularity. So yeah, that was super interesting to see it from that perspective. The other stat that was also interesting was the booking window. Like they looked at how far in advance people were booking their trips currently. And I mean, I think it didn't surprise me, because obviously there aren't many companies out there that allow you to book so far in advance as we do. Now, obviously, the reason we do that is because of our payment plans and how we do things. And we want people to have smaller payments to make trips more accessible. So we give people the option of booking it further ahead. Very few companies do that. But the data was that 62% were booking their trips within 2 to 6 months. 31% were booking within 7 to 12 months. 11% were booking less than 2 months in advance. And then only 3% were booking more than 12 months in advance. Now, if you look at our bookings, like that would completely skew the other way for us.
Yeah, massively. The majority of our bookings are happening sort of a year, 2 years out. I mean, a year minimum for a lot of them. We do get last minute bookings. Obviously, we do get people that suddenly go, hey, I've got some time off here that I wasn't expecting. And I would say that our Europe or trips that are closer, like Morocco, become very, very popular with sort of last minute bookings, because they are a little bit more affordable. Our Spanish adventure has been a great example of that.
Yeah, but I suppose as well, Jake, if you think about it, if you look at, obviously January for us is always a really good sales period for us. If you look at January, we actually had a lot of 2024 bookings come in during January.
Well, people get given their annual leave allowance, so they can suddenly start to plan a bit more. I think January is definitely the month of planning out that year. And that is where we do get a lot of people going, right, what have we got on? What's going on this year? And yeah, I would say, people are making the most of the payment plan that we offer. They are looking 2 years in advance. But yeah, we have seen an increase in people booking within 12 months. And I think, with the uncertainty around the rest of the world, let's say, I think it's even more of a reason to try and go to those places when you can, maybe as soon as you can, because you never know what's going to happen. You never know what's on the horizon. So yeah, if you're in a position where you can bring those dates forward and really make the most of it, I'd recommend it.
But we have seen quite a bit of that recently as well, haven't we? With people booking their trip and then bringing it forward and going, actually, can I pay it off sooner? And can I jump on the one 4 months before?
I had that today. That happened exactly the same. I had a conversation with a lady who had booked onto one of next year's trips, and she phoned up and she said, "Hey, a few things have changed. Can I bring it forward? I'd really love to go sooner." So, yeah, we were more than happy to accommodate.
And then the final statistic that I found really interesting, and it kind of goes against what we're doing as a business at the minute, but was the reasons people book their trip. And there was 5 choices, and the 5 choices were price, activity, itinerary, destination, and sustainability.
In that order?
Not in that order. I've put them in a completely different order for that reason. But which one of those do you think came out top?
Okay, run me through them once more. So you've got price,
activity, itinerary, destination, and sustainability.
Oh, I thought activity would be coming out on top, because surely people would tailor their holidays around an activity.
Yeah, no. So destination was the first point of call. So that was was done very well in terms of its ranking. Then it was itinerary. Then it was activity. I suppose those two are kind of quite closely linked, really, in terms of
pretty
the activities are going to be in the itinerary. Then it was price, and then it was sustainability.
Really?
Now, obviously, at the minute, we're having a big push on our sustainability and what we do as a company and becoming a better business. And at first, I was like, well, why are we doing it? Like, why are we bothering with it if people don't care about it? But then I think, we're doing it because we should be doing it. Like, if we want to continue to travel as people, we need to be making changes to how we are doing things. And I also think as well, of course, it's not going to be the top reason of why people book travel. Like, people are not going to book and go, I'm booking that trip because it's sustainable. Like, people are going to book in the first instance with what they want to do. Like, I want to go to Nepal. I want to go to Sri Lanka. I want to go to the Maldives. Like, that's why they're going to book their trip. Then I think they will then look at the itinerary of those trips. Like, has it got everything in it that I want to do? And obviously we work really hard on our itineraries to make sure that they are action packed and there are lots of things in them, and that it's what's going to sell the trip. Obviously then activity comes into the itinerary, like we just said. Price and sustainability were quite closely matched, and obviously I think in terms of what we were discussing the other day, I think was it on one of our Facebook lives that we did when we were talking about the Gokyo Lakes booking, where someone had a chat with me and then booked it with another company because they were cheaper. I think was that we discussed that.
Yeah, we did discuss that on live. Yeah.
And I think there are people out there who are predominantly going to always book on price. Like, that is, that's what they do. I would say that our customers don't book on price. A lot of our customers are repeat customers, so they book on, they book on the destination because that's where they want to go, but they book with us again because of the service and the product that they've become accustomed to, and that's been delivered. But I think sustainability is going to start to play a part in it in terms of people. It's becoming more front of mind now for people. And I think if information is given, and that's where we've decided that we are currently lacking, because it was really interesting, wasn't it, when we started to go down this journey of being a better business, of actually how much of it we were already doing, but we just weren't telling people about it. And we weren't kind of showing what we were actually doing. And also as well, like what our providers are doing as well, like the people we work with, what they're doing. Like, there's so much there that we're doing that people don't know about. And I think people will start to make the decisions. And I think if it came down to it, in terms of, let's look at a Thailand trip, for example. If you knew you were going on to a sustainable elephant sanctuary that, looked after the elephants and all of those things, and there was a trip exactly the same, but was going to one that didn't look quite as good, and the prices were fairly similar, like, which trip would people choose at that point? And I think then the sustainability would come into it at that point. It's not their reason initially for booking, but I think it is going to play much more of a stronger part in their decision making. I think that's
I think it depends on the person. Like, I totally agree with what you're saying. Price, especially, with what's going on these days, is such an important factor for people. I do think, we've got a lot of retention with our customers, because once they've seen what we deliver and they're happy with that, then we do get people staying on and booking multiple trips with us. I think that the other thing people like is that we don't do hidden costs. We're pretty upfront about what everything costs, and that can make it seem more expensive in the beginning. But when you start going away and breaking it all down with another company and not finding out how much they're charging for X, Y, and Z, or what's not included, then it can start adding up. And by the end of the holiday, what I always say is, if you got to the end of ours and you got to the end of theirs, would you really have saved that much money? And that's kind of just, I pose the question. But sustainability, I think it's a hot topic. People are discussing it more, which I think is really important. I think now that people are actively talking, not just about the climate crisis and sustainability, but about the steps that they can make. And, I've started seeing things. So, for instance, online shopping. I'm going to go off on a small tangent, but there was an option where you can have your product delivered that you've ordered, and you can have it for the same price. You can have it delivered sustainably. So the last mile is delivered on foot or by bicycle. Okay. Or for the same price, you can have that journey delivered totally by car. So there's no price difference. You just get to choose by clicking whether you want to actively contribute to making the world a more sustainable place. And I think that's something that people are going to start discussing, especially when it comes on to Thailand, and examples like that of, you might be able to go and do a trip where you get similar types of things, like going to an elephant sanctuary. But we've done a lot of research into making sure that we're putting our money into the best ones and the ones that make the most amount of difference. Just be smart with where you shop is what I would say people are starting to be much more considerate of.
Yeah, no, I think you're dead right. And I think we're still going to continue on that journey because it's the right thing to do. And I think, you've got those, of course, people are going to always consider price. Like no one's ever, people are always going to look around and shop around. Like that's just human nature for people. Like that's just what people do. And it will play a huge part of your buying decision. But then also as well, it could be cheaper, but the service could be rubbish, or, it could be cheaper, but you go and look at the reviews and the reviews aren't as good. So actually you then sit there and go, well, do I now want it cheaper? Because, this company's now only got 3 stars on Trustpilot or Google or whatever, and this company's got 5, but this company's only £50 more expensive. So what am I going to do? Am I going to so of course it's going to play a part, and people are always going to shop around and look around because that's just human nature. But I think, they're then going to look at things like reviews, things like sustainability, things like customer service, like all of those things are then going to play a big part. But ultimately, people are going to book somewhere because it's what they want to do. If you want to do Kilimanjaro, you're going to go and do Kilimanjaro. If you want to do Everest Base Camp, you're going to go and do Everest Base Camp. Now, the next bit, like they said, is how does the itinerary differ? Because now you're talking about which route am I doing? Like how many days am I getting? How many days is it before? How many days after is it? Do they take the extra acclimatization day on the trek? So that's where the itinerary then really comes into it. And of course, people then look like anyone else would at price. But I think the shock for me was how low sustainability was on the list. And I thought with everything that's been happening over the last couple of years, that would have seen an increase. But I think, again, because of what's happening with the current economic situation, price plays a much higher, people think with their pockets rather than maybe with their heads sometimes in terms of that.
Although the last thing I'll say on that is I have noticed a shift in what people are deeming to be, an important spend. So obviously with everything, people are cutting down on costs and deciding what they really need versus what they want. And I thought for a lot of people that they would start qualifying, regarding our trips as a want, not a need. But actually having spoken to a lot of the people on this last trip that I ran to Morocco, it was really interesting to see the shift that they had mentally, where they would go, no, when I was working out budgets around things and I'm paying monthly, so it was a monthly bill that was going out and I was maybe reducing some of the luxuries in the groceries and things. I kept this bill because I realized that actually it's a need, not a want, and a need in the sense of my mental health is so much better when I've been out and I've been walking for a week and hiking for a week and meeting new people and getting new experiences and telling those stories afterwards. So yeah, people are shopping shopping around and definitely thinking a little bit more about their pockets. But I've been amazed at how many people are realizing the value of these trips, and the knock-on effects. So they are, making the most of the monthly payments and keeping it because it's good for them.
Well, I think we'll end that one there, Jake. I think we've covered all of that off very well. Thanks for joining me today. Thanks for helping me sort of evaluate those travel trends that came out. There was some interesting stuff in there, and there's some stuff we weren't that surprised with. And obviously, from our perspective, it's great that what we're seeing is what the industry as a whole is seeing as well. So we will be back next week with another episode, and I'm sure next week we're going to be talking about Iceland and my trip that I'm currently on. We decided to put the travel trends one in because I've only been here for 2 days, so I don't think I can do a podcast justice. So I want to wait until I get back on Monday before we record the next episode. So I've managed to see it and do it all before we talk about that. But Jake, thanks ever so much for coming on today. Always a pleasure. And we will be back with another episode next week. Thanks very much, everyone. Goodbye.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Bucketlister podcast. Be sure to click follow to be alerted for next week's episode. For more travel inspiration, check us out at www.thebucketlistcompany.co.uk or follow us on socials. See you next time.